Good morning, guys. We're on lesson 121 today, and it's covering rational inequalities. And there's something different that happens when we graph a rational inequality than with just normal inequalities. And you'll know that this is a rational inequality. It's a quadratic inequality because we have a variable like this in the denominator. And here the domain is reals. So it's okay for us to have open and closed dots and arrows and lines in between. We don't have to have just a bunch of dots on the graph. The difference is typically to get rid of this x minus 4 in the denominator, we would just multiply both sides by x minus 4. But because it's an inequality, not just an equation, we have to multiply by that factor squared instead of just a linear factor. So when we do that, over here we get x minus 4 quantity squared times 1, which is x minus 4 quantity squared, less than or equal to. And over here, one of the x minus 4's cancels, but we have negative times the other one, which gives us negative times x minus 4. So remember, to square a binomial, we have to use FOIL. So x squared minus 8x plus 16 less than or equal to, don't forget to distribute this negative, so minus x plus 4. And then we set this less than or equal to 0, so we need to add an x on both sides and subtract 4 on both sides. So we'll have x squared minus 7x plus 12 is less than or equal to 0. And at this point, it should look somewhat familiar to you. This is the one that I told you first have to factor it. So x and x, factors of 12 that would add or subtract to be 7 would be 4 and 3. And they both need to be negative in order for this to be positive and this to be negative. All right, so you set each one of these equal to 0 to get your critical points. Some of you forgot to do that on the test. So you got the wrong signs, which put your solution in the wrong position. And then you put these points on the number line, and when you do that, for this particular case, you realize that there's no whole number in between 3 and 4, and that's not a problem. It still breaks the number line up into 3 regions. So a number out here might be 0, a number in here, 3.5, and a number out here, 5, or anything larger than that. So remember, these factors go right here, x minus 4, x minus 3, and you plug these numbers in each region into each one of the factors. So 0 minus 4 would be negative. That's all we need is the negative. 0 minus 3 would be negative. 3.5 minus 4, negative. 3.5 minus 3, positive. 5 minus 4, positive. 5 minus 3, positive. Draw a line. Now remember, right here, it says multiply the factors. So negative times negative, positive. Negative times positive, negative. Positive times positive, positive. And in this case, which one are we looking for? The plus or the minus? And how do you know that? You look at this symbol right here. It says less than or equal to 0. What kind of numbers are less than or equal to 0? Positives or negatives? Negatives, all right? And it says less than or equal to, oh, there's one other thing. Big problem here. This denominator, way back up here, if I plug in 4 for x, what do I get in the denominator? 4 minus 4 is 0. We can't divide by 0. So x cannot be equal to 4. Now, you don't have to just guess that. You can always take this parentheses, set it equal to 0, and that's going to tell you that it can't be equal to 4. That's where that actually comes from. It's not that you just have to guess. So now coming down here, The less than or equal to normally means that our endpoints would be closed dots, doesn't it? Because they would be included. It's a domain of reals, so it's okay to have open or closed. And in this case, because x cannot be equal to 4, I have to put an open dot here, even though that says less than or equal to. The 3 is fine. That's a solid dot on 3. Okay. Now, less than or equal to 0, we said was negative numbers, so it's this group in between here. So two things were different in this lesson. One is that we have to multiply by this factor quantity squared. Okay? The other is we have to set this denominator equal to 0 to find out what number it is not going to be allowed to be, because it would make us divide by 0. So I'm going to not forget to label those points so that we know what that is. All right, so that's the first one. Second one. Says m minus 2 divided by m plus 2 is less than or equal to 2. And this also has a domain of reals. But now, before I forget, like I almost did on the last one, I'm going to take this denominator, m plus 2, set it equal to 0, and put a slash through it so I know it can't be equal to whatever this number is. So m cannot be equal to negative 2. We need to remember that. Now we can go back here and multiply both sides of this inequality by not m plus 2, but m plus 2 quantity squared. All right, so here one of the m plus 2's cancel, and we have m plus 2 times m minus 2. Over here nothing cancels, so we have 2 times m plus 2 quantity squared. Now when we multiply the left-hand side out, this is a difference of 2 squares, so the outer and the inner terms will cancel. So we'll be left with m times m, which is m squared, and positive 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. Less than or equal to. We've got to use FOIL to multiply this out, guys. So it's m squared plus 2m plus 2m plus 4. And then that has to be multiplied by 2. So m squared minus 4 less than or equal to 2m squared. 2m plus 2m is 4m, times the 2 will be plus 8m, and then plus 8. All right, now remember we want to set this equal to 0, but we also want to keep the m squared term positive. So we're going to go this direction, minus m squared and plus 4. So we'll have 0 less than or equal to m squared plus 8m plus 12. Okay, so factor that. Looks like m plus 6 and m plus 2. Set each factor equal to 0 so we can get the critical points. Okay, so on the number line, place them where they belong. So negative 6 would be over here, negative 2 would be here. Break your number line up. Pick your points. And then pull your factors down here. So m plus 6 and m plus 2. Plug your numbers in. Negative 7 plus 6 would be negative. Negative 7 plus 2 is negative. Negative 3 plus 6 is positive. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative. 0 plus 6 is positive. And 0 plus 2 is positive. All right, right here it tells us to multiply these. So negative times negative, positive times negative, positive times positive. All right, so it says we're supposed to graph this is greater than or equal to 0. So the numbers that are greater than or equal to 0 are going to be positives, right? So the positives would be this region and this region. Now we got to go back up here. Domain is real, so open closed dots are all right, and lines with arrows. But m cannot be equal to negative 2. So before I forget, I'm going to put an open dot there because it can't be equal to negative 2. It says greater than or equal to, so this one is a closed dot. This one cannot be a closed dot because of this right here. And then the positive regions are here going outward. And then don't forget to label those two critical points. All right, one more example on this lesson. It says 1 is less than negative 2 over x minus 3, and this one also has a domain of reals. So let's take this thing right here. X minus 3 cannot be equal to 0, so x cannot be equal to 3. So we don't forget about that. Remember, multiply the inequality by this factor squared, so times x minus 3 quantity squared. So that times 1, nothing cancels, so we get x minus 3 quantity squared less than. Here, an x minus 3 cancels, but we have another one left over, so we put it there to be multiplied by the negative 2. So now use FOIL, use distributive property. We'll have x squared minus 6x plus 9 less than minus 2x plus 6. And we want to set that to 0, so add 2x to both sides and subtract 6 from both sides. So this will be less than 0, and that tells me right there because it's less than 0, I'm going to be looking for negatives, right? And this will be x squared minus 4x plus 3. So factor that. 1 and 3, and they must both be negative, less than 0. All right, so take each factor, set it equal to 0 to get our critical points. X equals 1 and x equals 3. So put those on the number line. And put my factors right here, x minus 1, x minus 3. Pick my numbers like 0, 2, and 4. So 0 minus 1, 0 minus 3, 2 minus 1, 2 minus 3, 4 minus 1, and 4 minus 3. Multiply the two factors, so negative times negative, positive, positive times negative, negative, positive times positive, positive. All right, so what should I do next on that number line? Domain is real, so open and closed dots are okay with lines and arrows. But don't forget about this guy right here. X cannot be equal to 3. So I'm going to put an open dot on 3 so I don't forget. It says less than 1, so less than 0, so do I include this 1? No, I don't include the 1. I put an open dot there as well because the domain is reals. And the only region that's negative is this one right here, so we draw the line and connect those two dots. So both of the dots are open on that one. All right. We have one more lesson to do as part of today's. So on lesson 121, you're going to be doing the odd numbers, and then on lesson 122, you'll do the even numbers.